one of Petrarch's more interesting admirers was Louise Labé in France. She was famously, um, well, a woman, but she was a member of the rising middle class. She was the daughter of a rope maker, but apparently one who had, done fairly well, was evidently not really just scraping by. She married another rope maker, and supposedly she had because of her status in the community, because of the money, quite frankly, that rope making seemed to be bringing in at that time. She was able to entertain and be and surround herself with some of the leading literary and artistic and intellectual forces of the day. She held a salon of sorts, and supposedly in there was a noted poet with whom she had an affair, and people like to speculate on this and that and whatever, and that's fine, and it does shape some of the interpretation of some of the poems, but ultimately, go for it if you care. What I find is significant about her is that she is writing as a woman in a period that is still very male dominated. It's something not quite shy of a miracle that she got any education at all. But she was evidently very well read in French, Italian, I believe Latin, and possibly even Greek and Spanish. She was formidable. She had a particular advantage in coming along at a time when Petrarch's influences were just starting to seep their way into the outward countries. The Renaissance was radiating, and so she was on that early wave as it crested into France, and she was able to take Petrarchan ideas, Petrarchan meters, and translate them literally into French, but not always in French, as we'll see. The fact that she's writing as a woman is significant, because it's very rare, and she does make it a specific characteristic of her writing. There is something quite deeply personal about her writing that reflects on her status as a woman. Now, the deeply personal part is part and parcel of the Renaissance as a whole. People were suddenly paying more attention to the dignity of man, or the indignity of man, the indignity of women, and their role in society. But she was bringing a very specific angle to that, quite frankly, was a little underrepresented in the Renaissance as a whole. So she was taking a particular angle at a particular time in a particular place, and there she was able to really just explode with significance. And her reputation has been rising in recent generations as people start to consider, well, okay, what other voices can we find in the Renaissance other than European males of the upper middle class and nobility. And she really she merits that reassessment. There is in her work always this sense of another person. She writes a series of sonnets. She writes an awful lot in a number of different meters and a number of different forms. But she has a sonnet sequence, which, like Petrarch's for Laura, when put together in a certain arrangement, a certain order, tell a story, in essence. And you get a sense of, throughout, a continuous theme of always having another in the background for her. There's always another presence, whether it's the presence of presence or the presence of absence. She has a kind of split identity. She's always comparing herself or referencing someone else that should be there or that is there, and the complicated relationship that brings, and the way it reflects on her own sense of identity. There is a sense of incompletion in that regard, where if that presence is always there, is she as a individual complete? Does she have an identity except in respect to this other presence, this other person, most commonly, this guy, this man, this lover who is absent most frequently? And is that incompletion, or is that just a sense of this other element overshadowing her? There's a sense of competition and a sense of a recurring theme of resentment at that power dynamic. As you read through Labé, just bear those things in mind. The first work that we have from her in the sequence is Not Even Ulysses. Sorry. Not even Ulysses, or someone as wise as he, would guess that a face like yours, a face so full of grace and honor and respect, such a divine face, could bring suffering like the pain you're causing me. Yes, love, your eyes in all their piercing beauty have stabbed my innocent breast in the same place once nourished and kept warm in your embrace, and still you are my only remedy. Hard destiny makes me act like one who's been stung by a scorpion but still hopes to heal, taking an antidote of the same poison. I am wounded. I ask you only to kill the pain, but not to extinguish the burning I crave to feel, this desire whose broken life would break my own. So you get, you get a couple of points here. There is the direct address to the absent lover. Yes, love, your eyes and all their piercing beauty. And the sense of she's dwelling on his appearance. Superficial appearance, always trying to judge, no sense. You get the sense that she's wondering what is going on behind that pretty face of yours. She doesn't know, which confirms that there is a difference, or implies that there is a difference between the exterior and the interior. Very Renaissance thought at the time. But also that it's inaccessible, that it's frustrating, that all you have is the physical reality to try and read into, and it is always leaving you wanting because you can never really access what's going on behind it, which of course is the stand-in for nature and God. We only have the physical world to look around, and well, gee, is this evidence of God? How can I see God through nature? This is all very Renaissance, and it's what the Romantics will pick up later on. You get a sense of the deception and the resentment and the hostility between these two people. She's dwelling on how good-looking this person is, how godlike, how heroic. Not even Ulysses, or someone as wise as he. Not necessarily just, good-looking, but smart. Would guess that a face like yours, so full of grace and honor and respect, such a divine face. So here, he's not being compared to Ulysses. He's saying that, only Ulysses, Odysseus to you and me, can somebody as clever as Ulysses could read into, can see what's going on. Ulysses is very famously the smartest of the Greek heroes, the most devious, but also the one who can read into people and see what's going on. And she's kind of putting herself in that role in there of trying to peer through and see what's going on with her lover. Yes, love, your eyes and all their piercing beauty have stabbed my innocent breast in the same place once nourished and kept warm in your embrace. That sense of duality of, I need that, I need your love, but it's killing me. And still you are my only remedy. The inescapable nature of it, the torturous, inescapable nature of it. I ask you only to kill the pain, but not to extinguish the burning I crave to feel. The burning I crave to feel. This desire, this unquenchable need to experience the divine, something really special. I need to feel love, just for love's sake, if nothing else. I need to have that connection with something special to remind me that it's a good world out there, that there is God and divinity and providence guiding everything, because without it, I'm just empty. Significantly, also, in the original, it's Italian. Writing in Italian, as Petrarch did, the conversant fluidity of the Renaissance culture, which at this point was really an international phenomenon. It was born in Italy, but now it is flowering all over, and they are and there's terrific communication between among the artists and among the writers and the thinkers, who are conversing not only with the classical authors that they so admire, but also with one another, so that there's a great sense of fluidity in the culture that really hadn't been there before during the medieval ages. The medieval ages, people tended to stay put and not look too far outside their scope. Here you have an entire class of people, primarily, significantly. She was in the merchant class, people who are dealing with, people from all over the world, who are trading in ideas and art that doesn't respect boundaries, that doesn't understand differences. And these people discipline themselves to be able to converse in those. She writes beautifully in Italian. She maintains a pretty exact Petrarchan sonnet model, a rhyme scheme: ABBA, ABBA, CDC, EDE. Boom, 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 boom. Very precise, very exact, and yet very fluid as well. She is an internationalist. She is a globalist at this point, because she can work on that level, and it's really pretty inspiring. Sonnet 10. When I see your blonde head in its laurel crown, and hear your melancholy lute strings sing, with a sound that would seduce almost anything, even rocks or trees, when I hear of your renown, all the 10,000 ornaments that surround your virtue, endorsing you more than a king, so the highest praise grows dim with your sparkling. Then my heart cries in a secret passion of her own, since all your graces are well loved and known, since everyone's esteem for you has grown so strong, shouldn't these graces help you start to love? To all the virtues that make you great, adding knowledge of my own pitiable state, so that my love can softly inflame your heart? Again, a direct address of this absent lover, a direct address of this lover who seems perhaps more glamorous than she does. Just like, dwelling on the face, the beautiful face. Now she seems more concerned with the fact that he has, he mentioned the blonde hair. Blondes. mentions the laurel crown, which means that this person is a poet. And here I will remind you, there were rumors, and there are, there's some historical speculation about she had a love affair with a well-known poet of her day. But here you get a sense of competition. Here you get a sense of resentment for the fact that this person is a poet. Laurel crown goes in the very first line, along with blonde head. Like, that pretty face is kind of annoying, the way it's always smiling. It seems so, perfect. But also the fact that he is a poet, and a recognized poet, a celebrated poet. To wear a laurel crown is to be esteemed as a great poet in the classical tradition. Hear your melancholy lute strings sing melancholy. That just sounds annoyed, with a sound that would seduce almost anything. So here again, you're getting a little bit of a interweaving between the poetic skill and the sexual skill, the romantic skill. Is she suspicious, or is she hostile to his ability to compose poems, or his ability perhaps to attract women? Because there's so much in all of this so far about the ability to attract, and she seems quite jealous of his attention to her that he might be spending somewhere else, and jealous also here of the attention others spend on him. He is the center of attention. You hear, so the highest praise. He is well loved and known, since everyone's esteem for you has grown so strong. Everybody's sitting there saying what a great guy you are and what a brilliant poet you are. It's like, I know you. You're not that great of a guy, and I'm a better poet, damn it. You can see that hostility just breathing through the lines, irritating. But again, you get the sense of this other figure is sitting there, and he is impenetrable. And she keeps asking it questions. She's not getting any responses. She's not getting any answers. But she just is fixated on this image that is, on the one hand, like she says, it's everything to her, but it's also a tyrant to her. It's also torturing her. She just can't quit him. She wants to. Number 12, you mentioned in the, it mentions in 10 there, you hear your melancholy lute strings. And of course the lute is a popular, it's a reference to the, it's a musical instrument that poets in the classical age would sing their poems to. The poems were always, generally sung, and the lute was a symbol of poems. In Sonnet 12, she references, "Lute, my companion in calamity, irreproachable witness of my sighs, faithful secretary of all my cries, you have lamented so often with me that my tears have driven you deep into pity. Now, if a delicious sound starts to arise, you turn it back to a sad lament disguise it with tones you've sung so much more frequently. No matter how I try to force you the other way, you struggle and loosen your strings and steal away my song. Still, when I watch my tender sighing, indulging me, listening again while I complain, I know pleasure, I find an opposite in my pain, and hope sweet suffering will lead me to sweet dying." Significantly, here the other that seems to be almost an appendage to her and a competitor for her, is a musical instrument. It's an inanimate object. It is. It doesn't always have to be human. In this case, it is not. The lute could be just a metaphor for this other person who was a poet, but it's also just the sense of perhaps her own poetry and her own ability to compose is a companion in calamity, always there when she is suffering. Irreproachable witness of my sighs means that the lute is always there when she is trying to write, perhaps, as maybe the lover is not. Again, that sense of presence and absence that is always torturing her, and it's really quite spectacular in the way it plays with that line. Um, Number 18, Sonnet 18, gives us a terrific view again of the female notion of it. Female desire is a wildly unexplored topic of male poets. They just sort of take it for granted. It's like, well, everybody wants me. Women love me. But from a female poet, they can bring something else to it. And she rejects the common refrain of Petrarch, where the women are largely symbolic. They are largely just icons to be prayed to be worshipped, and they have no personality other than just being, unreadably difficult. And you get a sense of that in Sonnet 18. Kiss me again, re-kiss me, and then kiss me again with your richest, most succulent kiss, then adore me, and another kiss meant to steam out fourfold to the very hottest kiss from my hot love coals, from my love hot coals. Oof. Do I hear you moaning? This is my plan to soothe you. 10 more kisses sent just for your pleasure. Then both sweetly bent on love, will enter joy through doubleness, and we'll each have 2 loving lives to tend, one in our single self, one in our friend. I'll tell you something honest now, my love. It's very bad for me to live apart, and there's no way I can have a happy heart without some place outside myself to move. Well, okay, obviously, female desire. She's quite hot and bothered at this moment, and there's something quite, you can respect that historically. It's like, okay, we don't get very many representations of female desire in art, and here we have one, and we can intellectualize it like that. But on the other hand, whoo, doggy, she is ready for it. But in that, you get so much more, because it's this immersive physicality of it, just this all-encompassing desire and sensual nature of the writing, which is dwelling on a physical act, the kiss, and a kind of profusion of it, a multiplicity of them, drowning in them. It is an inescapable physicality that the poet is just rolling in at this moment. Just look at all those commas in the first sentence. Kiss me again, re-kiss me, and then kiss me again with your richest, most succulent kiss, then adore me with another kiss, meant to steam out fourfold the very hottest kiss from my love-hot coals. Wow, that's just really, really building, because it's just profuse. It's irrepressible, and that is human desire. That is female desire, which in itself, to declare in the context of the Petrarchan sensibility, where women are supposed to be fairly chaste and removed, an object of sexuality, certainly not a feeling subject. It's radical. Significantly, however, there is that sense of doubleness, of dualism. I get a little bit of a chuckle out of the line, I'll tell you something honest now, my love. It's very bad for me to live apart. And in the English translation, of course, to be apart means to be distant from, but also it is a part. She is a part, a segment of something that she cannot seem to make whole. There's no way I can have a happy heart without some place outside myself to move. There's this great sense of divorce from oneself, of separation, she is somehow declaring her own incompletion, and she needs something exterior to complete her, and that's deeply personal, but at the same time, it's incredibly intellectual. The notion of stepping outside yourself and seeing how limited you are as a physical presence, as a singular being. The how can you do that? How can you get outside yourself and view yourself scientifically like that? Is it possible? The Renaissance is about examining the self and studying humanity, humanism, but the ability to step outside oneself and really examine psychologically, emotionally, your own identity is a remarkable move that not too many other poets at the time could keep up with. With everything, I always say beginnings and endings. So with a sonnet sequence, you got to consider the endings a little bit. And the endings of this sonnet sequence, there aren't that many of them. There are, I think, 24, 2 dozen. And the way she wraps it up, I find, is really pretty interesting. So you go to 23. What good is it how well, alas, you sang those long ago praises to my rich gold hair, or told me that my gorgeous eyes compared to suns, from which love's brightest arrows sprang, tormenting you again with such sharp new pang, with each sharp new pang. O tears that dry so quickly in the air, O death on which you promised you would swear your love, and where your solemn vows still hang. Or was it the aim of your deceitful malice to enslave me, while seeming to be in my service? This time, O love, I know you'll pardon me this tangle of all my anger and grief entwined, since I know for sure, wherever you may be, you endure your martyrdom, as I do mine. Wow. Okay, just a couple of things. First of all, no one can read that first couple of that first stanza without echoing Shakespeare's "Nothing like the sun." Your eyes are my love's eyes are nothing like the sun, or whatever. Where those long ago praises to my rich gold hair, or told me that my gorgeous eyes compared to suns. And Shakespeare's going to take that trope, which she is kind of mocking here. She is mocking here, and he's going to just take it one step further to make it just absolutely comic. But the standard trope of in idealizing women, of describing their physical characteristics, their outward beauty, as a kind of in celestial terms, and just dwelling on it and comparing it to outsized reference, like the golden suns. It's preposterous, and it's kind of a cliche. Well, it is a cliche, and she is just pointing that out. So here, her lover is perhaps has perhaps compared her in this way to these ridiculous comparisons, just using cliches, perhaps just to get her into bed. And she's just saying, well, what good is it? What's the point? Here she seems to be addressing a passion that has passed, and the passion is over. The love is perhaps over. The reality is just somebody who could never fulfill everything that she wanted from him, and that creepy feeling at the end of love is coming in and just turning sour. You get a sense of fatalism here, of fate here, of how all of the passion and the beauty and the wonderment of love, once it crashes and washes away, can leave a real empty feeling. This time, O love, I know you'll pardon me this tangle of all my anger and grief entwined, since I know for sure, wherever you may be, you endure your martyrdom as I do mine. Why love it at all if it passes? It's another dual reality, another dual identity for the love itself, between its ideal and its reality. And there's always something else that makes you want, oh, the ideal. Why can't I just have that and then I'll be happy? But here you get the sense perhaps they did have a brief moment of that, but still it passed. It didn't make her happy. There's no joy here. But the passing of the love, the lover exits the stage, and that's not the end of this sonnet sequence, which I think is significant because Louise Labé is writing about, she's writing about love from a woman's point of view, but it's not necessarily the women who concern her or not necessarily the man who concerns her most. She is more concerned at the very end with women. So, Sonnet 24. Sisters, do not reproach me that I've felt such love. It makes 1,000 tortures burn. Had 1,000 cares, 1,000 sorrows turn. My days to days that tears consume and melt. Rough words like yours shouldn't burden my name with guilt. If I failed, you'll know I feel all the pain I earn. So stop sharpening these needles. Someday you'll learn how high love flames every time it burns heartfelt. Even if there's no Vulcan as an excuse, no beauty like Adonis's to accuse. On a whim, love can force you to burn until even with less occasion than I have, you'll suffer a stranger love. So watch out. You could be far more unhappy still. Wow. She addresses her fellow women in her community. Sisters, do not reproach me that I felt such love and it makes 1,000 tortures burn. And here again, you get you can lean on the biographical tidbit about her possibly being a courtesan and having some, perhaps being known in her community, her relatively middle-class life, of being a bit wanton. Perhaps, having had a illicit affair, and she's always having all those fancy parties with all those snooty people from out of town. All those intellectuals and poets. You can see her sort of fighting back against that and couch that in those terms, saying, I know all ladies, I know you think I'm a slut and a bitch, but this is my perspective. But you get a sense of, just how alone she really is, because she does feel estranged from her own sex here, her own gender. The women in her community seem to be absent from her life, seem to be estranged to her, hostile to her. But I think it's more than just the fact that she had a love affair, but the fact that she's written about it. And here you see her defending a woman's right to write. The rareness of it at that age, especially, had to be quite acute for her. So you get this, it's not just that, do not reproach me that I felt such love, and it makes 1,000 tortures burn, and 1,000 cares, 1,000 sorrows melt my days to days that tears consume and melt. That's not just passion for another person, but that's living out your passion on the page. Rough words like yours shouldn't burden my name with guilt. If I've failed, you'll know I feel all the pain I earn. So stop sharpening those needles. Women are supposed to be, well, middle-class women are supposed to be concerned with needlework. She is not. She is a writer. Someday you'll learn how high love flames every time it burns heartfelt. And she throws in, of course, a classical reference, perhaps the kind of classical reference that somebody who spends all of her time with needlework doesn't have time to read as much, Vulcan and Adonis, but also classical references that are the heart and soul of Renaissance poetry at the time. So she is siding with I'm a poet, take it or leave it. On a whim, love can force you to burn until, even with less occasion than I have, you'll suffer a stronger and a stranger love. I think this is more about her ability to write. I think the man is absent from this. He is not mentioned specifically. It's just an idealized notion of love. A stronger and a stranger love is, I think, the experience of love on the page, love in writing, love in experiencing it and objectifying love through poetry, through exploring it, studying it. So watch out. You could be far more unhappy still, which is a threat. Perhaps she's going to write something nasty about them. Who knows? But it's, I think it's more that, well, if you were to start to think as I do, if you were going to start to write as I do, to study as I do, perhaps you would realize the tortures that love is. Once you start to examine the world around you, once you start to study it and consider the impenetrable agonies of human life, you will suffer more. And that's her role as a poet, but she's defending it. She feels under attack by perhaps their provincialism that rejects that role, but she is saying, no, this has value, and I am entitled to do it. And here you get why it's so important to consider her along with Petrarch and the guys. Is she offers a relatively rare voice in this time. She offers something that is very, very unique. It is all of the tics of Petrarchan poetry, of Renaissance art. The classical references, the interiority, the humanist focus. But she's stretching the definition of what a human being is, because without looking at half the human race, it's hard to really say that you study humanity. And she's willing to do that work and evidently pay the cost. It doesn't sound like it's particularly fun to be her. She feels quite racked with passion that is always unsatisfied, that there is always something missing for her, an other who is absent. And that's a brutal way to live. Now, you put all that aside, again, because that's just biography, but in this way, reading becomes, once you start to clue in on that dynamic, where poetry is about the feeling of yearning for something that you cannot see, then it's not just entertainment, it's not just poetry, it's prayer, quite honestly. It is seeking after the divine. It's seeking after God in everyday life and trying to find in the world around you some evidence that there is the hand of God making sense, guiding you, that will make it all turn out okay. even from the depths of despair, that it's going to be all right.